For the first time in however many months, we get an episode where we don't have to talk about the Chiefs' reign.
Isn't that illegal?
Freedom!
Welcome back to the James and Dame Show. I'm Josiah.
And I'm Will.
And we're going over the NFL award predictions because we're just kind of looking into who is getting what and who we really believe is getting what. Reality and then optimism. So there's kind of like the two. But we'll kind of see where we kind of land with our predictions. So I guess we'll kind of get right into that.
Yeah, we're gonna mostly be looking at just the nominees for each award and who kind of deserves it. So it'll be, like you mentioned, predicting who we think will get it and who we think more deserves it. Reality versus idealism, I guess. But I guess we could start with just like the most coveted award, single performance award, going with the MVP. Obviously, we know that the frontrunners have been Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then kind of snuck in there with Saquon Barkley. And then it kind of feels like, Joe Burrow has been thrown around up there. He's the fourth guy in there, and then I feel like Jared Goff he's the fifth guy, and I feel like he's just there.
Yeah, in my opinion, he is not really in the conversation right now.
Yeah, I feel like it's like really a 3-person. You could argue a 4-person, and then they always nominate 5 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Not sponsored.
Yeah.
And it is important to keep in mind that these decisions are made. The voting and stuff starts at the end of the regular season, so postseason does not matter, even though some of these players for some of these awards, you really wish that it would, and you really wish it counted.
Yeah.
But we'll start first with looking at Josh Allen. He went 307 completions to 483 attempts, 63.6% completion percentage, 3,731 passing yards. He had 28 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions. 14 sacks, which, when you go through the stats and first you're like, 14, that seems like a lot. Now when you look at some of the numbers, he had an over 100 passer rating. He had 530 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, so some good numbers there. And then obviously he led his team to a 13-4 record, the number 2 seed in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Going into the playoffs, which is very important. Obviously, that's I feel like what a lot of MVP goes into is not just how good you played on your own, the singular stats, but also how it contributed to your season's success, like your team's success.
Mm-hmm.
So 13-4, which is, well, You'd think really good, but it's only really the third best out of the teams here. But obviously he is one of the front runners, the other one being Lamar Jackson, who was similar, 316 for 474, 66.7% completion percentage. He had 4,172 pass yards, 41 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I don't even know what that was. Allowed 23 sacks. He had a 119.6 passer rating, so almost 20 better than Josh Allen. 915 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, so not as many. And led his team to a 12-5 record. And I'm just curious, just those two alone, because if you look at the stats, I feel like a lot points in the direction of Lamar.
Mm-hmm.
But also because like there's a few things that Josh Allen has on him. Like it's not it's less negative plays and a better record. But if you look at like obviously again record, what Josh Allen was doing, he was doing with I feel like so much less. I mean, he didn't have Derrick Henry, and he didn't have like I guess Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews, but like it's an interesting conversation, and I try to do it completely unbiased because that's how I try to approach a lot of these things. A few things I'm like, I'd be a little bit, but the case between these two, especially just looking at the numbers alone, I feel like it leans a lot towards Lamar. But
yeah, I can see that.
we've also, it's more than just the numbers itself. Part of it is popularity, and as much as people hate it, that's just the case. And the other thing is just like, what did they do for their team? Not just in numbers, but how did they lead their team and such? And I think that's where Josh Allen catches up a lot because Lamar did have help. But you look at like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was leading in passing yards, passing touchdowns. He did have more interceptions than both Lamar and Josh Allen at 9. He was sacked 48 times this year. So if that doesn't tell you something, then I don't know what will. And then the other key thing that I think also kind of pushes him to the outside here is his team finished with a 9-8 record, which obviously isn't fully on him, but I feel like it's one of those things where if your team I feel like at least has to, make the playoffs and have 10 wins. I feel like because if not, it's like, are you really the most valuable player if you can't even get your team there? And again, he did phenomenal, but it just seems like one of those things where maybe this is why you get put in like an offensive player of the year award, because that looks, I think, less at what it did to your team and your team's success. So
That's true.
maybe me, I don't know.
The only reason why I would choose Josh Allen is because of the fact that he was working with a lot less, and he was literally the only person on that team that sometimes just wanted to win. There was that case for a while. This is kind of the same thing with some other quarterbacks or players on certain teams. Allen definitely carried the load, I'd say, a lot more than Lamar. I think I would choose Josh Allen, but I wouldn't be surprised Lamar wins it because stats are definitely more favorable for Lamar. But if we're taking this into account of who was the one carrying the load or who was leading said team or whatever, what position you are, Allen kind of squeaks by just barely, in my opinion, because I definitely see how much he's carried that Bills team. This was supposed to be a down year. Like, this was supposed to be not a year that they were going to go 13-4, second seed in the AFC. I think the only reason why they're there is because of Josh Allen. If there was any other quarterback, I'd say in that situation, they would not be where they are.
No, and I think there's a lot of credit to go like around, because I think a lot of people stepped up, and I think someone else who was nominated for an award down the list is also to earn some credit there. But yeah. I mean, maybe we could throw in, because I know there's, again, we've mentioned it's like been a 3-man race all year. That third man being Saquon. Who, first year anywhere but the Giants, and he does what he's done, 345 attempts for 2,005 rushing yards, which is 5.8 yards per carry, which is pretty ridiculous in the NFL. I mean, anything over 4 is pretty dang good, and so he's at a ridiculous level. He had 17 rushes of 20 yards or more, which is only actually second. I'm going to draw some, we'll get around to some of the numbers that I think are interesting. But you have 13 rushing touchdowns, only 2 fumbles on the year, and his team finished with a 14-3 record, which is the best record. And I think, well, it's not the best record of them, because obviously Jared Goff, but of these three, it is the best record. And it's hard to kind of argue that he did not carry a load like a quarterback would on most teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why he's in here. I think that's why he's the lone running back in here. Is he carried the load that a quarterback was expected to. Obviously, he got a lot of help from the defense, and I think that's part of what's gonna help like hold him back. But also at the same time, the defense got help from him because he was the only thing really moving the ball consistently. He just had such a good year, and like you look at like rushing touchdowns. That is the one thing I can point to and go, that number should be higher if you're anywhere else but Philly.
Yeah, it's true.
That
He would have a lot more.
I could have seen like at least 4 more, at least.
Very least, yes.
Like he only was allowed to score on big plays pretty much.
Yeah.
So
that's basically it.
I get a lot of the hype behind him, and then we'll just quickly round out with Jared Goff again. Don't think he really belongs here. He does actually have, of these quarterbacks, the best completion percentage at 72.4, which is a pretty solid one, and he still finishes, 4,629 passing yards, which is second to Joe Burrow there out of these guys. 37 passing touchdowns. He had 12 interceptions, but 5 of them in one game doesn't help. And 15-2 record. And so like his stats aren't bad. He has a lot of good stats. Interceptions by far the most of any of them. But what really puts him at the bottom, I think, of this list is the difference of how much is he leading that team compared to everyone else. Because like I think this is the situation. This is the one case of he's just the quarterback.
Yeah.
This is the one player where he's just the quarterback. He's doing well, but he's just the quarterback on a really good team. It's like Brock Purdy last year, where it's like he's really good, but he has a really good team around him. And I think that's what holds him back here compared to Joe Burrow doing most of it by himself. Him and,
Jamar Chase.
Lamar and Derrick Henry. And then Josh Allen and Saquon are the only ones who really are doing it by themselves. So those are the candidates. Those are the numbers. And I guess you kind of, actually made your pick, and you think that you at least want Josh Allen.
I would prefer Josh Allen. However, it's one of those things where I'm torn between Allen deserves it, but we need a player that's not
a quarterback,
not a quarterback to win MVP for the first time in forever. And I believe Saquon Barkley can do it. So if my whole choices will change depending on like who gets picked for what position or what award, and then it kind of gets shuffled down and rearranged. And I feel like certain people would be picked. If one person gets picked for this, then I'll be like, okay, this person will be picked for this then. So
who's your ideal pick? Like, who do you think should have it?
That's the thing, though. It's just I want it to be Barkley, but also if I'm being realistic, it's going to be Lamar or Allen, but I would prefer Allen over Lamar.
So you're going to go with Allen?
I'm probably going to go with Allen. Not saying I don't like the idea of a running back being MVP. It's just knowing how the NFL works. It's just you can't really escape that. Also, people just prefer quarterbacks than anything else at this point. So it'd be nice to see somebody that's not a quarterback who wins it, and hopefully it might be this year or next year or something like that, but we'll see.
All right, and what is your realistic guess? Like, what do you think the NFL the official vote is going to come out to be? Prediction.
Lamar.
You think it's going to be Lamar?
Lamar will probably be the realistic one. Allen is my preference. Barkley is like the ultimate hope. That's kind of how I view it.
Okay.
So
All right. So what I'll go with, because again, I think we'll just do for each one a like who you think deserves it and
Who's
who you-
actually going to get it?
who's your like who you think is going to get it. And I think who deserves it, which it's so tough because again, I think there are three guys who last year could have won it. All three of these guys could have won it last year. Hell, like if Joe Burrow had a few more wins, I think last year he would have won it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I just think with the way things are, who I think deserves it is really tight. And there's a few numbers that really skewed me, but I'm still going to stick with Saquon because of, and I'm adding a little bit because these awards come with narratives.
They do.
Narratives do decide it because a part of it is popularity and stuff. And I think he has the best narrative. Josh Allen, his stuff is playoffs.
Yeah.
Lamar's is also playoffs. Like theirs is playoff stuff. Josh Allen hasn't had it yet. So,
Yeah.
I mean, part of it, like him getting it, but there's so much behind Saquon.
Yeah, there's a lot of story and a lot of emphasis.
And I
this year.
think deservingly, I think he should have it,
Mm-hmm.
especially just because he dealt with such a bad franchise for so long. And now he's like free and he does this. And it's just like,
he's released.
I mean, I would almost, it'd be like an ironic comeback player of the year where he didn't do anything wrong, but he just was freed and he's like, this is what I get
What
to
did it
do.
do? Yeah.
But, so I would say deservingly Saquon, but realistic prediction. And this is only because I've seen people point this out because again, it's a lot of it's narrative and popularity. People don't want to see Lamar get it again. I mean, maybe the NFL, I mean, going with the trend, maybe, but like, I think it's going to be Josh Allen.
Okay.
He's gotten the hype this year. He's been like almost more the golden boy this year than Patrick Mahomes. I mean, unless the
kind of.
I know the NFL, like NFL favorites Patrick Mahomes. Like that's really their golden boy. He's going to be for years. But I feel like this year, as far as like marketing and what the hype goes around, I think Josh Allen's kind of been that guy. I mean, leading all the way up to playoffs. I mean, he was the only one to really beat Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like there's so much there. Like you stopped the unstoppable force in the regular season. Obviously, it didn't work in the playoffs, but playoffs don't matter. I think Josh Allen gets it based on narrative. Again, numbers don't really say it, but also there's more than numbers anyways. But that's my opinion and my guess. We'll move on. But you did make a good point of what gets picked here will likely change
everything else.
Which is basically just this other one here.
Yes.
Which comes down to Offensive Player of the Year. Obviously, again, we have Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Saquon, so we'll run through all of those numbers again. But the other two that get nominated are Derrick Henry and Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown, 127 receptions, 1,700 yards, averaged 13.4, 17 receiving touchdowns, 19 receptions of 20-plus yards. And I think the stat that was by far the most ridiculous was his yards after catch.
Yeah.
His yards after catch, if you take away his yards after catch, he is not a 1,000-yard receiver.
That's true.
He had 787. And I think the next closest I saw when looking at stats in the NFL this year was like somewhere in the 500s.
Yeah.
So he
pretty ridiculous.
Was on an island all by himself. And again, I think this is another thing that contributes to Joe Burrow getting a little less credit. That and, again, the record. Bengals fans will be mad. But he absolutely has thrown his hat in the ring. It's just, again, such a offensively talented year. But the other one is, again, Derrick Henry, who had a little bit of a slump throughout the year. Started really hot, though. 20 less carries. He had a little less. He actually finished with 84 less yards. So he was not really that far behind. Finished 0.1 more yards per carry than Saquon. He had 2 more rushes of 20 yards or more than Saquon. There were 4 players who had double-digit rushes of 20 or more yards on the season, and Derrick Henry almost had 20. And then he had 16 rushing touchdowns, so more than Saquon, but we addressed that whole thing. And 3 fumbles on the year. So comparing them, obviously, this one I feel like could be up to anyone. I will say I still don't think Joe Burrow gets it here either.
No. Joe Burrow doesn't get here. I'm a firm believer that if Barkley doesn't get MVP, he gets the Offensive Player of the Year.
It would be so much simpler if that was the turnout. So we'll base yours off your prediction and your deserved off of your MVP pick. So
deserved.
You picked Allen.
Deserved Allen for the MVP. Deserved, I'd say, for
Offensive
Player of the Year. See, if I say Barkley here, then I'm contradicting what I said earlier. I don't know.
About
he deserves MVP, but being realistic, it'd be Allen, or it'd be like Lamar, but I don't know.
Well, we can. Do you actually think Saquon is deserving of MVP?
He does deserve it. I just don't think it'll happen. So maybe it'd be flipped then. It'd be Saquon deserves MVP, but realistically, Allen gets it. If it was realistic with Allen being MVP, Barkley would get Offensive Player of the Year. If it was Barkley getting the MVP, then I think who gets the Offensive Player of the Year is Jamar Chase. Triple crown and the yards after catch. That's kind of what sets him apart from everyone else.
And that is fair. And that's going to be a big thing is because, again, I say deserved MVP is Saquon, so that kind of takes him off the board. And this is where it gets really tough because, again, I think here's the thing, though. If Saquon wins MVP, you're not going to give Offensive Player to the guy that you thought was the runner-up at running back. I feel like that just is, not fair. So I think I might have to agree with you there, even though I feel like it could be Lamar because I feel like he's viewed in that light of he's like the kind of quarterback where it's like, oh, he's not just a passing quarterback. So he's viewed as more just an all-around offensive player, more so. But also at the same time, the Offensive Player of the Year has been more relegated to a non-quarterback position because MVP is. So I feel like if I'm to say deserved, though, Saquon gets MVP. He shouldn't get both. So I will say Jamar Chase because, again, triple crown. That just seems fair. What my prediction will be is Saquon gets Offensive Player of the Year because, again, I think Josh Allen will win MVP and Saquon is going to come away with something, which means I think Lamar is going to come away with nothing in either case, which is heartbreaking for how good he played this year, but also at the same time,
it kind of makes sense.
He's gotten his stuff at this point. He's gotten so many singular awards. He just needs.
He's literally Aaron
Lombardi.
Rodgers. Yeah, I was about to say he's literally Aaron Rodgers without the Super Bowl.
So, yeah, I don't think that's the biggest deal, and I'm sure if he wins nothing, he'll probably come out and be like, don't even care at this point. Just want the Lombardi at this point. And I'm like,
yeah,
you go get it. So, yeah, I think so. What we're in agreement there. So I guess moving on, then we'll look at Defensive Player of the Year. This is where it gets to be a little bit more fun. It was a weird year though, because it didn't seem
Yeah.
like defense was super. There wasn't like super strong performances on defense.
No, it also just happened to be one of those things where when you thought of anybody on defense, you think of like Bosa, Watt, Parsons, like you think those guys, and usually the corner or two thrown in there. But this year, it's been more like people in the secondary. Like that's usually who's been shining the most, I'd say, this year.
Yeah, I mean it's especially. I mean edge rushers get so much glory, and that's frustrating. But a defensive rookie of the year is going to be fun to talk about. But before we get there, we will stick here. And you kind of mentioned how it's a little bit odd, but I think there are two guys that were nominated. I don't know how well you know like the actual nominee list, but the guys that were nominated, you had Myles Garrett,
Yep.
Trey Hendrickson, who was the sack leader. So I think that's
true.
why
He
he's
was
there.
a sack leader.
T.J. Watt, another household name. Zach Bond, who I know I've
Yeah, he
given
did well this year.
some praise to. He's also an off-ball linebacker, which is not super popular. Maybe you usually have one. And then the other guy being Patrick Surtain. So we got a little bit more of like a difference in position. Myles Garrett, he had 40 solo tackles, 47 total tackles, 14 sacks, 22 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery.
Yeah.
A good year, but like not like his
Kaboom.
award-winning years.
Yeah, it was not like a boom year for him.
And again, yeah. Then you look at Trey Hendrickson, 33 solo tackles, 46 total tackles, 17 and a half sacks. Again, that is the best in the league. 19 tackles for loss, so a step behind Garrett. He had 6 pass deflections, which as an edge rusher is a ridiculous number.
Yeah.
And 2 forced fumbles. T.J. Watt, who I thought had a little bit more of a quieter year, turns out I was wrong because he had 40 solo tackles, 61 total tackles, only 11 and a half sacks, which for him is
Very odd.
it's low, but he still came away with 19 tackles for loss, and he had 6 forced fumbles and 2 fumble recoveries. So he punched it out 6 times this year, which is, I believe, the most by any player this year.
Should be.
Zach Bond, his numbers are going to look a little different because, again, off-ball linebacker. He had 93 solo tackles, 151 total tackles, 3.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 4 pass deflections, an interception, 5 forced fumbled. So he was also pretty up there.
He's on
And
fire.
a fumble recovery. He was also on another member of one of the scariest defenses, him and T.J. Watt. And then Pat Surtain, the lone secondary man. It's kind of hard to find stats with like ESPN, which is usually where I try and look at this stuff. But Pat Surtain, his tackle numbers are going to be a little bit lower because it's a coverage position. 11 pass deflections, 4 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and a touchdown. But the thing that I trust more with coverage guys is PFF because they grade things better than ESPN does because it's not just stats. They grade
It's
things
actually
separately.
yeah.
And Pat Surtain was graded as the best coverage defender this year. So makes sense why he's up there.
Reasonable.
Yeah, I think my concern here is this is an award that is so commonly awarded to just the best edge rusher. And I'm curious who you think deserves and who you think will win. But yeah, I'll let you go because I'm just like I'm so curious where I even start with this.
Who deserves it and who will get it are the same person. Surtain. Surtain deserves it this year. Very great corner. I just watching him play, I'm just like, good luck whoever's throwing down there to him. I just seen all the breakups he's caused, He's a lockdown corner. There's no denying that, and he's going to be one of the best defensive players for like the next few years. And you can't stop him really. He's going to lock your receiver down real fast. I haven't seen him make too many mistakes, and usually when those mistakes happen, they're very rare or they're not that big, not that big of plays. So he's very good at containing the receiving side of the offense. So I think Surtain does deserve it, and he will probably get it because not that, well, I guess this is technically still a popularity contest, but Surtain is just a really good corner. And we've mentioned this before. This year for defense has been kind of low, or like the bar has been pretty low, especially with all the injuries and how good the offenses are this year. But I wouldn't be upset if like Hendrickson or Bond gets it, because Bond makes sense. He's been really good too. He's been underappreciated to an extent. Hendrickson, just because he's the sack leader, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets it. But realistically, and I would refer, I think Surtain doesn't get it because of just how well he's done.
Yeah. The way I go back and like literally anyone I think but Myles Garrett.
Yeah, Myles Garrett doesn't get it this year.
No, because it's, and again he was still good, but that defense doesn't have anything to really speak for. It just was not as pretty of a showing. But yeah, looking at it, I think Trey Hendrickson is going to get a nod because of leading in sacks, but it wasn't, especially being on the Bengals, I think he's going to get counted back a little bit. I think TJ Watt is going to be probably a top 3 in votes.
Yeah, just because of the name.
Because of the name, and he has stats, but his sacks are low. I think
it's not his year. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think the sacks is what's going to keep him from getting it. Although, again, usually it does go to an edge rusher, I feel like.
Usually, yeah.
But deserved, I definitely think it should come down to Bond and Surtain. I go back and forth, but I think deserved, I think I'm going to go with deserved Bond. And who will win it? I might go Bond for both.
Okay.
Just because he's been so good. My concern is because of the position he's in. I think the only person who's gotten that sort of recognition at that position recently has been like Fred Warner.
That's true.
I think Zach Bond could, but I think Surtain might get more attention. And then obviously, again, the edge rushers are there, and I'm just going to be peeved if they do. But I'm going to say Bond for both because I think he's gotten some recognition, at least by the media.
Yeah, at least by the media, he's gotten recognition.
And with how the Eagles have done, even though, again, it's more like singular performances from here on out, I do think he gets it just because of how good his team was, and he was kind of the head of that. Although, again, you might be able to argue he had more assistants.
That's fair, I guess.
You look down the board and you'll see why. But we'll move along on to Offensive Rookie of the Year.
There's kind of a clear cut who is getting this one this year.
I know who's going to get it. I want to kind of split this up by positions because we have 3 receivers and 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I want to split it up by quarterbacks and receivers first and make your picks there, and then we'll do like a final. The quarterbacks being Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm.
Jayden Daniels threw less.
Yes.
But was more efficient. He finished with a 69% completion percentage to Bo Nix's 66.3. Bo Nix had 3,775 yards to Jayden Daniels 3,568. 29 passing touchdowns for Bo Nix to 25 for Jayden Daniels. 12 interceptions for Bo Nix to Jayden Daniels 9. Jayden Daniels was sacked 47 times. Bo Nix was only sacked 24. not a big thing, but Jaden Daniels
Interesting.
was finished basically right at the 100 passer rating, while Bo Nix was in the 90s. But I think this one is taken away, obviously besides just their performances themselves, was Jaden Daniels had 891 rushing yards and
Yeah.
6 rushing touchdowns to Bo Nix's 430 and 4 rushing touchdowns. So I think, again, Bo Nix did very well.
It's just unfortunate that he had to be competing for the same award the same year that Gene Daniels has been playing it. So
Yeah, this is the case where it's unfortunate that you don't get to count the postseason, because if you count postseason, clear cut winner is Jaden Daniels, but you don't. So, Ugh. um, but yeah, I think that kind of makes that cut and dry. But then you look at the receivers. You have Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, and Brock Bowers.
which is fair.
All very fair.
I think of the three, Brock Bowers is definitely the top. Neighbors did really well. However, Brock Bowers on a Raiders offense, with how much he got, that's
It's super interesting though. Brock Bowers had the most receptions. It was 112 for him, 109 for Neighbors, 87 for Brian Thomas. But Brock Bowers finished in third amongst those three in yards. It was Brian Thomas was 1282, Malik Neighbors 1204, and Brock Bowers 1194. And then you go over to touchdowns. Brian Thomas also finished with 10 receiving touchdowns. Malik Neighbors 7, Brock Bowers 5. So
it's pretty spread out, I'd say.
it is pretty spread out. I think Malik Neighbors, even though he had a really good performance with like no quarterbacks, but I think his numbers are just shy of competing with like either. I think he's just a notch below, and I don't think that's really on him, but I think he's going to be the third between those two, and I think it's between Brian Thomas and Brock Bowers. I mean,
Agreed.
everyone talked about Brian Thomas being the Pro Bowl snub. I think he was third in the league in receiving yards this year.
He was, yes. He was up there.
He was up
Top
there,
five.
absolutely. And I think it goes back and forth between these two. Again, you look at just pure receptions. Brock Bowers has 25 on Brian Thomas, but you look at receiving yards, and Brian Thomas has almost all extra 100 plus 5 more receiving touchdowns.
Yeah, basically.
So these two, I think you could go either way, and I don't know. I kind of lean towards Brian Thomas, but obviously neither of this is going to matter because we talk whether it's deserved or who's actually going to win. I think either way, it's Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
So
It's just what's going to happen.
I was just curious because again, the like if you take out the quarterbacks, the receiver competition is.
Interesting.
It was such a good race between those three, but I mean, we'll keep that one short. Well, not short. But we'll move on to Defensive Rookie of the Year. This really comes down to two teams.
It really does. Yeah, I just noticed that.
Chop Robinson is in there. He had himself a good year. He had 6 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 26 total tackles. But you need 5 nominees, and I think he just got thrown in there. Reality, it's the 2 Rams and the 2 Eagles. Ironically, both the Rams are D linemen. Both the Eagles are secondary. Yeah. So I'll dive into the numbers on the Rams, which is we got 8.5 sacks for Braden Fisk, 10 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumbles recoveries, 44 total tackles to Jared Verse's 66 total tackles, 4.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and also 2 forced fumbles and 2 forced fumble recoveries.
Okay.
And both just spectacular years. I think a lot of people would argue Jared Verse is kind of the leader of the two, but both of them together have been a menace, and I think Verse just gets more attention, which, again, these are all slight, popularity competition, so I think he probably is the favorite of the two. And then we get to the Eagles corners, who, again, I strayed away from ESPN and looked at PFF, so there's a lot more here, but we'll start with Quinyon Mitchell, received about a 68 season coverage grade, 63.6 in run defense, 68.5 overall defense, only allowed 21 catches on 36 targets, which is a 58%, 82.8 passer rating when targeted, and 277 passing yards allowed, 6 breakups, 2 penalties.
Yeah.
Then there's Cooper DeJean. We're looking at, I mean, obviously besides, you don't really count the special team snaps, even though you really should. He had an 85.5 season grade, which, holy cow. Season coverage grade, 66.3 run defense, 83.2 overall defensive grade, 14 catches allowed on 21 targets, which is 66%, so a little bit higher. 76.9% when targeted, 76.9 pass rating when targeted, and 97 passing yards allowed, 2 pass breakups, 0 penalties. And, that might seem like a bunch of jargon to you, which is fine. I think what really this comes down to is Quinyon Mitchell is a coverage safety or coverage corner.
Yeah, I was about to say there's a difference between the two.
DeJean is an amazing slot corner. Mm-hmm. He has made some of the most impressive tackles he put Derrick Henry on his ass, which is asking a lot of a corner. I mean, we've seen what he's done to corners.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have the white-on-white crime with him and Kupp going at it against each other in that divisional round.
Yeah, I think both of them have been amazing. I think as far as rookies go, I think they're clearly the top defensive, best corners, best coverage, everything. Can't believe the Eagles got both of them. I'm so pissed. But yeah, also proves that white boys can play corner. So it's gonna come between these two and the two defensive guys. I think I will say between these two, I like Cooper DeJean more. Quinyon Mitchell doesn't get as much flair because, again, he's just a coverage guy. He's more like Pat Surtain and stuff where you don't get the picks. Your job is to not even get the ball thrown towards you.
Yeah.
That is what you're looking for. And so that's, that if not that, then pass breakups. And your job isn't to be a ball hawk. Your job is to keep the ball away.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't get as much flair, but he's done a very good job. Cooper DeJean, slot guy, or whatever you want to call him, he gets to play more in the run. He gets to guard the tight ends a little bit more, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll let you make your pick of, I guess, the 4, unless you really think Chop Robinson has a chance. But
no, I'd say who deserves it. I'm gonna go with the underdog here, Cooper DeJean. I like him as the defensive rookie of the year. I like that idea.
I do too.
But if we're being realistic, it's probably gonna be Jared Verse.
Yeah, which I think the thing really comes down to, I think it's going to be DeJean or Verse. I think Mitchell and Fisk are going to be 3 and 4. But the other thing is I look at Verse and Fisk's numbers, and I almost feel like Verse doesn't pull away, at least by the numbers, does not pull away from Fisk enough, and DeJean might have enough popularity behind him. I think with narrative and stuff, I think deserved DeJean, absolutely. He's been so much fun to watch. But I think who gets it, I think DeJean still has a chance. So I'm going to stick with DeJean.
Okay.
Again, these things usually go to edges, so I would not be surprised if it was Verse. But yeah. I am putting faith in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't usually turn out well, but I'm putting faith that they'll go with DeJean.
No.
But we'll move along. We only got 3 awards left. Comeback Player of the Year. We got the return of Joe Shiesty.
Yep.
We know his story, his numbers. Sam Darnold, J.K. Dobbins, Christian Gonzalez, and returning member Damar Hamlin, who, and I think this one obviously is how well did you play this year, but also what are you bouncing back from?
Mm-hmm.
And so Joe Burrow, injury. J.K. Dobbins, also injury. Damar Hamlin, honestly, is the one that kind of bugs me. People will be 50-50 on this. Christian Gonzalez injury and Sam Darnold just being irrelevant for however many years.
Yeah.
We'll address Damar Hamlin. Again, he's having a pretty good year. He's been starter caliber.
Yeah.
So I'll give him that. But you can't, the comeback has to be from last year unless he was still rehabbing from the thing 2 years ago. So he's not coming back from rehab. He played yet last year. He just wasn't all that.
Yeah.
So really what he's coming back from is being underwhelming last year after his comeback. And there's some people who think that there's a chance for redemption for him to get it this year. I'm going to sit here and go, if he didn't deserve it last year,
Then he's not going to deserve it
he
this year.
definitely shouldn't deserve it this year because now it's just a narrative thing.
It's all a story.
I don't know if you're in a different boat than me, but that's just kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. There are a couple players who deserve it more than Hamlin. I'm not refuting what happened to him is valid for not deserving that. It's just it's been 2 years, and if we're going to constantly talk about that kind of stuff, I'd say it shouldn't be in a platform as an award. I'd say that should be more of a thing where you just, I don't know, make it a policy or awareness for player safety or something like that. You don't make it an award situation, I feel like. And that's what they were trying to do last year, and I understand that, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think personally, the chance for him to win that award would have been last year.
Yeah, and I do think he kind of deserved it last year. It's just he underperformed, and that's just what happens.
I think that is the case there. Because again, I think this year I don't really think you can't argue that. You shouldn't argue that because that's 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come back from that this year. So
alas,
I'm gonna, whether that goes into my prediction, maybe, but as far as deserved, no. Joe Burrow, obviously, again, had a very, very good year after coming off of a season-ending injury. Sam Darnold having a similar, especially when you just look at regular season, a kind of Baker-like year as a bounce back. Baker, Geno, many have done it before. J.K. Dobbins, he had a good year.
Yeah, he was a bit quiet about it, though.
He finished with 900 yards. He had no fumbles and 9 rushing touchdowns. And the only reason why I'm going to say I don't think he gets it is, well, actually, 2 reasons. One being you argue injury, but you can't rack up every single injury. Like, you can't count every season-ending injury he's had. You can only count last year.
The one last year.
If you could count every single one, it'd be like, yeah. But if it's just because it's just last year's, he bounced back from that, I think it takes away a lot. And then there's also the fact that he still ended the year injured, which is like, you didn't even escape it completely. So I don't think he will get it, but I'm glad he actually got more of an actual season this year.
Mm-hmm.
So really, to me, this does come down to Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold, Christian Gonzalez. And I don't know. I'll let you kind of make your pick for each, but
let's see here. Deserved Sam Darnold. Who gets it is Joe Burrow. Burrow, I think, did a really good job this year. Definitely bounced back from that injury, and I think he did pretty decently from what he was coming back. I mean, the stats kind of show it. There's a reason why he was barely in the MVP conversation. However, Sam Darnold going from whatever he was before this year to this year is pretty impressive. While, yes, you do have a very loaded roster to help support you, they kind of brought out the best of him. The thing that will probably tarnish his year a little bit was probably the last 2 games he played. That's just probably what's going to do him in, really, if he doesn't get it. I would prefer Sam Darnold, but I wouldn't be hurt if Joe Burrow got it because Joe Burrow was technically statistically better. But Sam Darnold had quite a turnaround from what he once was. So,
Yeah. I do want to give props to Christian Gonzalez though. He did come out, and again, he came off of a season-ending injury last year, came in this year, and he played so well. He was, I think, probably the only like real bright spot on that defense.
Mm-hmm.
He was one, I think, I don't know if he actually finished by PFF's grades as like a top 10 corner exactly.
But he was really good though.
He had high 70s in
Well, there you
several
go.
grades, which is, I mean, again,
That's
you
still
look at
not
like
bad at all.
DeJean and Mitchell, and they were like 80s, which is a very good grade.
Mm-hmm.
So high 70s is a good grade.
Great, yeah.
So I'll say that, but I do think with the quarterback situations, it's probably going to go to one of them. Because again, you look at season-ending injuries, you're probably just going to. You can compare Christian Gonzalez. You're comparing Christian Gonzalez to Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow, to the public eye and everything, played better, and they came, and everybody else's eyes off of a season-ending injury. Doesn't look any different.
Yeah.
Even though they were very different injuries. So I think it'll be down to Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold. I think deserved. I do think it probably does go. I think deserved. I might have to go with Joe Burrow. Just because, again, his numbers are ridiculous, and he did do a lot of it himself compared to Sam Darnold, who had so much help around him.
Okay.
And his numbers were also, again, not as flashy. Yeah, Joe Burrow he had much less help. Sam Darnold, not as much. Who deserves it? I go Joe Burrow, who actually wins it. I'm really concerned it's going to be Damar Hamlin, but I think I'll stick with Joe Burrow.
Okay.
And then Coach of the Year, we got Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, also Dan Campbell of the Lions, Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings, Sean Payton of the Broncos, Dan Quinn of the Commanders, and Andy Reid of the Chiefs. And I think Andy Reid probably first one out.
Yep.
I think Dan Campbell probably second one out, even though overcoming injuries is a very big thing. But just because of how good that team was, I think probably second. And then I think Sean Payton third, even though the way he turned that team around was also very good. I think his just late season collapse didn't help.
Yeah. I would say who will get it is Kevin O'Connell, but who deserves it is Dan Quinn. I don't know how you make the Commanders turn around like that. I mean that team was a mess for the longest time, and it took so long. I mean, obviously with Dan Snyder and all those people out of the picture, they could finally be good, but you know, Dan Quinn has always been a good coach, and it's finally good to see him, succeeding in a head coaching position again. And I don't know. I think he deserves it, but I wouldn't be surprised if O'Connell gets it, and he's probably going to be the one to get it because O'Connell is a really good head coach as well. So
Yeah. And I actually completely agree. I think O'Connell probably does win it, but I do think Dan Quinn should. Again, Andy Reid, they always have, the top teams. Dan Campbell, I think, is more deserving between the two because of what he went through. And compared to, it's just if they had this leap from 2 years ago to this, I think he also, or especially 3 years ago to this, I think he outright wins it. But because of how good they were last year and how good the team looked, I think that almost discounts it a little bit. And then again, Sean Payton, they had that little stumble, and so that didn't help.
Yeah,
so I think
the end of the season was not very helpful for them at all. I mean, Sean Payton did what he could without a roster, but also it's just why they had so many chances to clinch that playoff berth, and they only did it by beating the Chiefs.
Yeah, so I'll agree. Dan Quinn deserved, but Kevin O'Connell will probably win it. And then last we have assistant coach of the year. Who actually knows these guys' names? The nerds, probably. We have the Bills OC Joe Brady. And we have Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. And we have Lions offensive and defensive coordinators Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. Quick stats. Joe Brady he was 10th in offensive yards, second in points, and he had Josh Allen, who had a monster year. Vic Fangio had, he was first in defensive yards, first in pass yards allowed, and second in points allowed. And
so really good.
The Eagles' defense was just really good. Ben Johnson, second in offensive yards, first in points in the NFL. Lions offense was just really good. Aaron Glenn is there. He was fifth in rushing defense, seventh in points allowed. Nothing super stand out, but what he's there for is because he had probably the most injured unit in the NFL. And it still was a pretty good unit, even with those injuries. And then Brian Flores, second in rushing yards allowed, fifth in points allowed. I think he gets just a lot of credit for his creativity on that defense and how much fun that defense was to watch. But I think this one comes down to the Lions coordinators and Vic Fangio.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I do think that the person who will probably get it is Ben Johnson. That's probably who's going to get it. However, I do prefer Vic Fangio. I think he deserves it because, like you literally just listed off, first in two categories and second in another category. That's impressive for a defensive coordinator. I don't know. It's not very often you stumble upon those kind of coordinators. So, I mean, there you go. That's probably why I'm sold with him. And also the Eagles' defense is like very scary.
Yeah, I'll give credit to the other guys, and they've been very good. I think I'm going to agree that I think Ben Johnson wins it because, I mean, one offense gets so much credit in this league nowadays, at least. And I mean, they had probably the best offense. I think it was them, the Ravens, or the Bills. And I think the Bills was really just Joe Brady and Josh Allen.
Yeah, pretty much it.
I mean, they had people, but point being, I think Ben Johnson gets it because offense, and he did a very good job. But I do think deserved is Vic Fangio because even though that defense they have so much talent, they did so good. They were such a strong unit. They were second in points allowed, which really should have been first if it wasn't for the Chargers playing the way that they did. If it wasn't for that, they would have been first. I think they were behind by 0.1 points per game.
Something like that, yeah.
Against a team that allowed, I think, over 20 points like 2 or 3 times, which is that's just an unfair metric, and you still that really should be first there too. And also not to mention that they ended 14-3.
Yeah.
In a year where their defense was, I mean, you take out Saquon, that defense is really the only thing that did anything. So
yeah, pretty much.
I think he's as far as like, an assistant coach, as the award title is, I think he was the most helpful. Again, you have 2 Lions guys in there, which I almost feel like should take away from each of their names, as both of them are there. I think Vic did just so much on his own. And I think just so much credit to him. And again, I still like Brian Flores. Credit to Aaron Glenn, because he had to work through hell like Stefanski did last year.
Yeah.
And, Joe Brady, Ben Johnson, both did very good jobs. I just think Vic Fangio deserves it. Ben Johnson will probably get it, though. So
Yeah, that's reality.
yeah, but that does wrap up the awards, our predictions, and who our opinions on who really should earn these awards. But let us know if you agree or disagree, or if you think we're stupid. As always,
we're probably stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's new? But thank you for joining us. We will have Super Bowl preview coming out real shortly, and next thing you know, season's gonna be over. It'll be off season.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, we're
I don't
almost
like
there.
it. What happened?
The Chiefs happened.
Probably. Yeah, that's right, actually.
They ruined everything.
I blame them for everything, really.
Joking, partially.
That's all. Don't let me with him right now. Don't let me with him.
But we appreciate your company and your listening ears, and we hope to see you in the next video or this off season. Come back around whenever.
See ya.
Bye.